So since we've got no money, it's really important that we sort of rectify the situation. So today we have the Treasury Department, right? We have people that take care of that, and at this point, there's no branch like that in our federal government. So we create a Department of Finance. Under the Articles of Confederation. So we've got to get some people to lead it. Now, eventually we'll have, if you've know anything about Alexander Hamilton after spending time listening to the soundtrack from the musical or anything like that, we know that Alexander Hamilton is eventually going to be our money guy. But that won't be until we write the Constitution. So under our Articles of Confederation, our money guys are going to be these two guys I've written over here on the left, Robert Morris and Haym Salomon. So Robert and Haym were business associates that worked together during the war. Now, during the war, they did some fundraising to help pay for supplies and pay for soldier salaries and things like that. So they did a great job and they really helped. So now at this point, now that we've still got some debt, the federal government's looking at them and think, well, they've done it before, maybe they can do it again. So the two of them sit down to sort of come up with a plan. Now, one of the things that Solomon does is he actually loans his own money to the federal government. He was a very wealthy businessman, and he knew that the debt that we had racked up for ourselves at that point was pretty big for a brand new country. So he decides to loan some of his own money, and most of that he'll actually never get back. It never gets paid back to him, but he does it anyway. He probably knew that he was never going to get it back, honestly. So the two of them sit down, and one of the the main plan they come up with to help get some money for the federal government, remember we can't levy any taxes, is they decide to pass a 5% tax on imports. And so to do this, right, this would basically be an amendment to the Articles of Confederation, to the AOC. And now if you remember a minute ago, I told you what is necessary for an amendment to the AOC. How many states have to agree to this? All of them have to agree, all 13. So it ends up being once again, this doesn't pass because of one state. All states agree but one, so they're not able to pass that 5% tax on imports. And this is a perfect example of why unanimous votes make it so difficult to get anything done. Okay, so now we've got some other problems. Okay, so traders, merchants, and people like that are now having to pay high customs duties since they're not a part of Great Britain anymore. And what I mean by that is if any of you have traveled outside of the United States and come into the U.S., you go through customs, which is basically where you claim anything you might have bought in another country, because if you buy something of such a valuable price, I don't know, if you buy something that's worth more than $10,000, you're supposed to pay a tax on it when you enter into the U.S. So dealing with trade of other countries like that, there's always taxes and things. So before we declared our independence, we didn't have to pay any customs to Great Britain, right? We were Great Britain. We were part of that country. You don't pay customs to a country you're part of. When we buy things in America, we don't have to pay a customs duty on them. But now we're not part of Great Britain, so we do have to pay a customs duty. So things are getting more expensive for our merchants and our traders in the U.S., and that's going to be a bit of an issue. Another problem that we're going to see for our farmers is that they're losing bonuses. Now, Great Britain knew that not every crop was a cash crop. Now, what's an example of a cash crop? Tobacco is an example of a cash crop. Cotton is an example of a cash crop. Cash crops are crops that turn a financial yield immediately. Very valuable crops in high demand. Those are cash crops. Crops that are necessary but not as high demand, not so glamorous things, crops like indigo. We need those things. We need farmers to grow them, but not everyone's going to be inclined to grow it when it's not going to be a money maker, right? You might just want to scrap it and start growing indigo. So Great Britain had a system where they would pay a bonus, sort of, to all of these farmers who were agreeing to grow these crops that weren't as popular, to sort of help balance out Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. To balance out the fact that they weren't going to be able to make as much money since it wasn't a cash crop. Now all of these farmers who are growing tobacco are going to be, they're going to see a huge decline in the amount of revenue that they're making. They're not going to be making as much money. We're also going to be seeing fewer workers. Okay, so when we split from Great Britain, some people leave. So the amount of people that, and we're also going to see less immigration for a short period of time. So what that means is the amount of people we have available to work in these industries that we have now in the U.S., it's declining. So it's going to be harder to get things done. Another problem we have, you see on the right that picture of gold and silver. We A very popular thing is to have, today we don't do it, and that's a whole other story, but for much of American history, our money, our paper money, is backed up by gold. That's called being on the gold standard. That means, let's say there is $10 billion of paper money actually floating around out there in the world. If you add up all of the actual cash that everyone has out there, let's say it adds up to be $10 billion. Well, that means that for all of that money, somewhere in the U.S. Treasury, we actually have that amount of worth in gold. So that helps to hold the value of our money at a certain level. When your money is not backed up by gold, the value of your money can fluctuate. So we're going to see some inflation. So at this point, our money is not backed up by gold or silver. So we're going to see a lot of inflation happening. So some states, because of this inflation, the continental currency is going to really skyrocket. It's going to be almost worthless because it's going to go up so much, the inflation rate is. And so because of that, some states start requiring that their taxes are paid in gold and silver because they know that the money is essentially worthless. So does everyone have access to gold or silver in the colonies? No, absolutely not, right? If you're a regular old indigo farmer in North Carolina or you own a sugarcane plantation in South Carolina, you probably don't have a whole lot of gold and silver sitting around to pay your taxes with. So that's going to be a big issue for a lot of people in the colonies, and that's going to lead us to debtor's prison or debtor's jail. So if you couldn't pay your taxes, then what they would do with you is they'd essentially put you in prison until you could. Now, I don't really understand the logic of that situation. I don't really know how you're going to make money to pay your taxes from prison, but that's a whole other thing. And this is going to hit farmers really hard, right? They're already in debt. A lot of them are, especially the ones that agreed to trade with us during the war instead of Great Britain. So now all these farmers they've lost their bonuses, right? Inflation is going up. They have to pay their taxes in gold or silver. They can't. They've gotten into debt. They can't pay off the debt. And now they've landed themselves in debtor's prison. So all around, the moral of the story for today, guys, is that the Articles of Confederation are absolute trash, just from beginning to end. But that's okay, right? Trial and error. We got to learn from our mistakes, and luckily we will.